Welcome to the Career Adventure Podcast, your source to forge your own path. My name is Paul Fisher, founder and host of Career Adventure. Today, my guest is Sandhya Sudhakar. She's a certified coach, Enneagram practitioner, speaker, facilitator, the founder of Self at Work, and the host of the Working Your Way podcast. She takes a trauma-informed, inclusive approach to leadership development and team building. Prior to starting Self at Work, Sandhya built a successful career in sales and marketing at Procter & Gamble, Coty Beauty, and Oneida. She started Self at Work after a sabbatical centered on self-exploration and redefining success on her own terms. Welcome, Sandhya. Glad you're here.
Thanks for having me.
Would love to just jump right into what you're doing now at Self at Work. Describe it a bit for listeners.
There are 3 different ways I work with people. The main one being I work with teams. That can look like team coaching for smaller groups where we're really rolling up our sleeves and working together and figuring out how to collaborate better, or it can be larger group workshops. I work with a framework called the Enneagram, which is known as a personality assessment, but really it's an emotional intelligence tool. Like many of these kind of frameworks, it can help you in how you show up, how maybe that works for other people, doesn't work for people, what your strengths are, what your kind of motivators are. I like to think about it as this framework that can be the backing of a lot of other organizational tools like communication and conflict. It's a pretty cool tool that I nerd out on matching it up to other types of modules and topics, helping people navigate change based on their type, or how do you get into conflict based on your type. Really, that's the bulk of my work. And then I do some keynote speaking, I do some one-on-one coaching, and then I have my own podcast.
How did you decide on Enneagram? Did you take it yourself first and really liked it, or were there others that recommended it to you? Did you try a bunch of different types of tools? Because obviously there's like Myers-Briggs and the Strengths Finder and a whole variety of different career/leadership development tools.
I don't know if any of these stories are traditional, but I didn't actually get into Enneagram intending to start a business. I did discover it in my own life as a tool when I was dealing with some burnout in my career and some challenges in a relationship. It was something that I just got really curious because I had come to this point where I don't even recognize myself anymore. What's going on? I had an old boss that mentioned it to me, and I got really into just reading and understanding. It gave me a lot of aha moments. I went on my sabbatical, which I'm sure we'll talk about. I actually just started doing workshops for people for fun while I was traveling in Colombia or in Indonesia. That was how that framework was born as I use in my business. I didn't even have a business at that time. It just was like something that I loved doing and that people were responding really well to. And so it's evolved from there.
What's your Enneagram type?
I'm a type 3. Do you know yours?
Yeah, 7.
Okay. All right. I get that adventure, it's on brand.
Yeah, creative. Not that others aren't creative, right? Like just extroverted creative versus introverted creative. Say more about how you got into doing workshops while you were on your sabbatical.
For the record, even in my corporate chapter, really always loved these frameworks. I know you and I both have a history at P&G, but I learned how to think in structures. I always loved these tools because they helped us learn. I had hit a point in my career where I'd gone through a couple of acquisitions. I had changed industries and I was burned out. I didn't have any connection to the people that I was working with. A division of this company that I worked for had been acquired. And there was a lot of ethical issues that I had with the leadership. There was no real importance placed on culture. It drained me. I was phoning it in at work and I was like, who am I? Because I've always been this achiever as part of the type 3. I had decided that I just needed to take some time off to decompress. I knew what I didn't want to do, but I didn't really know what I wanted to do yet. I thought if I just take some time for myself for the first time in my career, and have no goals, which was not normal for me. It was a really cool experience that allowed me to actually just follow what I enjoyed. What I found was this rediscovery of learning. I had been exploring Enneagram for myself to understand, I feel this way, what's going on. And my sabbatical, it was supposed to be 4 months, and I went to a couple of different places. I spent some time in Mexico City. I visited friends in different parts of the US. One of my
Mhm.
first bigger trips was to Bali with a company that does these group trips. You're
Mm.
in one city for 2 to 4 weeks. They specifically design this experience where they ask you, what do you want to get out of this time and what do you want to contribute to it? I was this corporate ladder climber and I was like, I don't have hobbies. Could I organize like a bar crawl? Sure. But I was like, oh, I don't know. It was a weird moment because I was like, I don't know. I can't play an instrument. I can't teach people anything. I mentioned I've really been into this thing called Enneagram. I could do a workshop on that and people's eyes lit up. I just put together a little workshop and the response that I got to it, it was something that was notable. People are really into this and they're having these aha moments about their lives and I'm having so much fun doing it. And so it was one of those things where I was like, there's something here. I just don't know what it looks like yet.
Yeah, I love that. Free association, almost like blank slate, allowing your mind to grab onto an interest and then ultimately test it. That's so hard to do, especially I'm sure given where you were coming from at P&G and in sales for that matter, right? There's just expected goals, et cetera. Is this something that you might do with people, whether clients today, to help uncover different types of paths or types of things that they should be considering as teams?
I started my business when I got back from my traveling.
Hmm.
I did have this one team client who happened to be the CEO of the travel company. He was in my workshop in Bali. He brought me in to work with his team, which was really cool. It was very organic how I started working with teams. I was like, sure, I could put together a team workshop. Let me think about that. I started working with some people in career coaching. This kind of I've been achieving for a long time and I know that this isn't it for me. I want to figure out what I want to do, but I just don't know where to start. I started using Enneagram with those folks too. The cool thing about the framework is it is so versatile for a team that they're a newly structured team and they really just need to build trust because they're going to have to move really quickly. We can build some trust. We can understand how different people operate. We can understand this is your strength and this is your strength and this is your strength and how do we leverage them instead of making those things. It's really annoying that every time I have an idea you shoot it down. Instead we could say, okay, I'm the ideas person and I'm the risk person. Actually we get to work together on that. And
Yeah.
that's how, from a team standpoint it works, but it also helps you understand what are the innate talents that you bring into the world. For the type 7 it's ideas, possibility and
Yep.
innovation. How would you use that in a future career? It's a really cool way of seeing what do you naturally do well, what's really important to you, all those things that we do, values and strengths and blah, 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 blah. It gives it an umbrella for all of it. And it makes a lot of sense out of all of it too for people.
Absolutely. Not to overuse a word, empathy. One of the things that I found to be really valuable with it is, so I'm a 7. I'm an ideas person, but like someone who might be, I think my wife's a 1, or she's less about ideas, more about efficiency, completing, finishing, like task management, which on both sides are needed, right? And so if I understand
Right.
her more and she understands me more, then you start to go, oh, the ideas guy might not always be about every idea is right. It's more about generation of ideas, but then the ideas guy, and we need other people that can help bring these to life and help keep the team on track. How did you find the company that you were going to go on that trip with?
Yeah, I knew that I was going to take some time off, and my plan was to take 4 months off. It ended up being 7 because I was having way too good of a time and I was not ready to come back and figure out what I was going to do with the rest of my life. I actually was just at a friend's place and I had already made the decision to take the sabbatical. And we were just chatting. And a friend of a friend said, oh, I know this and who basically took a year off and she just went 1 month here, 1 month here, 1 month here. And it was all with this one company. And the company is called Unsettled. They're still around today. They still do these trips. They're amazing.
Mhm.
I knew that in 4 months, I wanted to do a lot of traveling and I wasn't always going to have friends that would be available because they had jobs. And so I was trying to find some way to travel with people, but travel solo and just be alone the whole time. It was a good way to mix it up. And I found them and at the time, I think had like an interview process just to make sure you're not an asshole. That you're in it for good reasons and they keep like a certain culture in the group on the trips. But it ended up being a lot of people who either were in kind of life transitions or
Mhm.
some digital nomads that live and work in different places. It opened up my eyes a ton. To your point, I actually had always thought being an entrepreneur looks like having to move into your parents' basement and eat ramen. I wasn't willing to give up my lifestyle, and I didn't have some big idea of a product to create. It opened my mind to see different people doing different kinds of things and having a work life flow where it wasn't like, this is my job and I go to my job at these hours and then I go
Mhm.
home. It was this kind of fluidity of work and life and work and being self-employed in a different way, a different structure than I had in my head. That changed a lot for me.
Was there one specific example of how that was playing out that you saw that resonates?
It wasn't like a specific person or job, but it was the
Mhm.
idea that you can work for yourself and not have to work all the time and not have to give up your life and your lifestyle and all of those things. It just had me thinking differently about even just, oh, actually, maybe I do want to be an entrepreneur. I think that was the biggest thought that I wanted that. And the other thing
Mhm.
that's interesting is, and it's still something I am sorting out, I also knew about myself that I thrive through recognition and external validation. That for me was fuel. It's part of the type 3. We want to be seen and we want to be seen as successful and we want to have these goals and meet the goals and get validated for those. So I was like, I can't work for myself because I won't have a boss to tell me I'm doing a good job and I need that. So there's lots of other ways to see and to recognize the value of your
Yeah.
outside of this traditional corporate structure. That was another important reframe for me.
In working for yourself, what are some of the tools or things that you've had to kind of lean into to help bring it to fruition?
My business is called Self at Work. My podcast is called Working Your Way. I use this as a laboratory to be like, how do I optimize what I love to do and what people need and this kind of Venn diagram of those? And it really truly is about working my way. I'm constantly paying attention to energy management. I'll sit down to write a LinkedIn post and I'm like, oh my gosh, this feels like torture. What is it about it that feels like torture? Why is this so hard for me? So, really
Mhm.
thinking about if there are things that feel like a struggle, can I figure out why? And can I figure out how can I use the things that I actually do more naturally, easily, without the struggle and replace them. An example of that is my posting on any kind of social media is stuff from my podcast because I would love to have conversations. And if I can find the team to partner with to create the content from the thing that I love, I get to do what I'm good at and what energizes me
Yeah,
and they get to do something else and I still have that outcome of being out there in the world and having a point that other people can see.
that makes sense. You talked a little bit about some of the challenges that you were facing in the corporate world and moving into then your sabbatical. Are there a common set of challenges that you typically encounter with people related to their work slash career that are more common than others?
Yeah, I think two things come to mind. One is in the corporate world, you have a box on an org chart and you have tasks that you have to do. Figuring out how you can do them in a way that flows better with the natural way that you work is a big challenge. And it's one that I work with teams on around, okay, this person thinks this way, or they can process information best if they have this information, or these resources, or more time on these like big projects, recognizing how we all operate differently and how we can like bring the best solutions and work back to the table. If only we would allow them to do it this way or to do this instead. And I think that's a big part of inclusion, frankly. It's of understanding that we all operate differently. Those things don't have to be stressors. They don't have to be things that are constant arguments, but they can actually be like, oh, if we could just understand these things better, we can work together in that sense. Purpose is another big one. finding work that you feel a sense of purpose in is like
Right.
probably one of the biggest things that people come to me like one-on-one to work on. It's huge and it's important, and we get to figure out what that means for each of us.
But you hear these stats of like only 1 in 10 people will actually do something that they really love, whether the point is like some low number, right? Which inherently feels as if it's tied back to purpose. Are some of the biggest inhibitors to people ultimately living or working in a way that is aligned with what their purpose is?
There's a really cool body of research called job crafting. I don't know if you're
Mm-mm.
familiar, but it's basically there was a researcher who had been observing like a hospital janitorial staff, and they were tweaking little parts of their job, get more fulfillment out of their work. They went from seeing their jobs as, oh, I clean the rooms, to help build a better experience for patients and their families. They were doing little things like switching out artwork in rooms or things like that. At the end of the day, we can find more purpose in our work in big ways and in small ways. But in corporate, okay, you can't throw out your whole work plan and like just do the parts that you love. And so
Yeah,
it's about finding these smaller shifts. Purpose doesn't always mean this is my life's purpose, this is the impact I want to make on the world, and I have to tie my job to that. Purpose
mm,
can be, how do I get more fulfillment out of my work? And that can look like working with a group when you might be working on a task alone normally, or even connecting people to the outcome of their work, because sometimes we're so many steps removed from
it-
what actually we do, how we impact a consumer on the other end or a patient on the other end. Finding ways to tie back to that, to remember that's what we do. So there's a lot of different ways to get more fulfillment out of what we do. But I think one of the biggest barriers is like people just don't feel permission to ask to be different. It's normal, right? I didn't do it. We assume this is my work. This is how everybody does it. This is how I do it. Now I'm going to go execute. And instead, a lot more leeway than I think we recognize.
yeah,
If we can tie it to, here's the benefit for the company if you allow me to do this in a different way, or if you allow me to tweak this thing that I'm doing or connect better with the
totally.
outcome of what I'm doing.
Yeah. So I've been working on this certification called Strong. It's owned by like the Myers-Briggs company, and it's basically all about surveying interests within the work world to help people both in work but also leisure pursuits. One of the things that they talk about is these things called personality style scales that, to your point of what you just said, sometimes people like to work with ideas rather than data, or individually versus teams. As I've been doing this, I've wondered, isn't part of it just helping ensure that like managers know with whom they're working, who might be on their team, and how to tie into those types of things? Is that something that like you've seen part of it's in just like the figuring out a way to coach the manager in a better way?
Yeah, I think it starts with like us knowing ourselves. We're moving so fast that a lot of people, if you ask them as a manager, like, what can I do to support you better? People don't always have answers. And
Yeah.
that's when it's something I've seen in some of my clients. So, one, we have to know ourselves and what works best for us. Two, we have to share it with each other. And three, we have to find those opportunities to ask for shifts, to ask for changes, to
Right.
ask for ways to tweak what we're doing to make it feel more fulfilling. That's part of energy management, is as we adjust things to a place where we're getting more out of it, we can give more back too, right? It does benefit the company. It's not always easy to recognize.
You're working on your own, learning and succeeding as an entrepreneur. Are there things that you miss about working in a big corporation?
I miss knowing that I'm going to get a paycheck. For sure. Healthcare not costing me an arm and a leg. There's
Yeah,
those.
yeah.
In all seriousness, I am so like in love with the idea of I can just do things on my terms that it's really hard for me to picture wanting to go back ever. The one thing I will say is when there have been moments where I'll work with the team and we'll have this amazing half day together and they're really connected and have all these great new systems and structures to implement in their team meetings because of the work that we've done together. And then I'm like, okay, bye. And don't have too much fun without me. There's like a little bit of FOMO because I'm like, oh, I love working with these people. It's ironic, right? All my work is with teams and I don't have my own team. I have found ways to do that. I have a team that I work with on my podcast. And so having places where I can find thought partners, or I collaborated with a friend on a workshop and engagement for a company that we did last summer. And those things, I'm like, okay, I need to find ways to collaborate more because I do miss that. And I love it when I get to do it. It's not something that's the structure of my day to day, but that doesn't mean I need to hire a team because that's just not where I am in my business.
You're joking about paycheck and healthcare, but in all seriousness, like you've been,
the truth.
yeah, but what have been some of the biggest challenges I've had people that I've talked to talk about knowing when like make payroll or business model concerns, right? I had one person that I talked to that launched her business twice. The first time it was project based, and the second time she shifted it to more like a recurring revenue cycle or structure. What are just some of the big challenges that you would want anybody that's like jumping from a corporate environment into entrepreneurship with eyes wide open to know that they're likely to face?
The biggest challenge I've had is I'm not doing what I used to do in corporate just as an independent. And that can be what a lot of people do. If you're in an agency and you leave and you then do freelance copywriting, right? It's a much more natural transition. You have client contacts built in, right? For people that have worked with you before. For me, I went back to school and I started this whole kind of like team culture, leadership development. I was in commercial strategy. I was in sales and stuff like that. I have a great network, but I don't have equity with that network in what I do now. My biggest from like a marketing standpoint has been visibility, right? Making sure that the people who know me, trust me, worked with me before, know what I'm doing now.
Right.
Just getting the word out. And I did work in sales at P&G for 13 years and I hate sales. I hate reaching out to people and the whole like getting over my own ego or fear of rejection to proactively go find clients. Been the hardest, I think, for me. The uncertainty in income, of course, is a big thing. If you're not going to go independent in the thing that you're doing in corporate, it's going to be a longer ramp up and it's going to be more like ups and downs and adjusting what you do. To your point, your friend launched a business twice because there's just a different business model that worked. For me, this isn't a succeed or fail question. It's how do I continue to pivot and adjust until I get to a point where, oh yeah, people want to hire me for this. This is really adding a lot of value on their teams. It's easy for me to talk about and articulate the value that it brings. Like it's just making shifts until you get to that point.
Totally. It's like you have this Sandhya brand that was in sales. That's how you were known, sales and marketing, and unknown. And now you're more enterprising type of a space versus this is a more like socially focused, so to speak. And so making that leap requires persistence and purposeful meander.
Yeah, I mean, it does. And it just requires like, all right, you've got to be like more proactive about making sure people know what you do.
Yeah.
One of the hardest things to do when you're a solopreneur or a consultant is to articulate the value that you bring in a way that's very clear for people to understand. It sounds simple, but it's really hard. I could go out there and say I help teams communicate better, but it's okay, but how? And how do I do? And all of those questions, right? So.
And then the aspirational message, you want to make sure it connects to the ground and because it's so hard.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it just sounds like it could be anything.
Yeah, totally. It's a constant learning experience and like lots of ups and downs and not for the faint of heart, but the doing work that I really love. And I do feel like I've gotten to a point where I've hit my stride that I'm like, okay, I'm really good at this. People really value it. We're in that sweet spot of I now have done this enough to know when I talk to someone about their team, like this is what I would recommend. And it doesn't feel like I'm reinventing the wheel every time.
Yeah. So then how'd you get into sales? You said you don't like sales, or maybe you don't like sales, which is fine. into finance, and like I started my career, I post MBA career in finance, and kind of like, how did I get into finance?
Yeah. I mean, it's one of those things where I was just taking the next successful step. I run marketing. I've always liked marketing and the creativity and the analytics. I interviewed with a bunch of different companies when I was coming out of school, and P&G was the one that was a really good company, and it happened to be a
Yeah.
job on the retail facing side. It wasn't a really defined career path. It was like live in different cities and work on different teams and do different types of roles. That's what attracted me to it, not like I'm going to be excited to wake up and see how many cases I shipped yesterday. In 13 years, I never got there, but I did like the problem solving piece of it. I did really like managing people and teams and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sure the skill, you've been able to apply them obviously to what you're doing now. And so that's been my experience in finance, right? Is that while I'm not working in finance, I can very easily apply the skills to thinking about a P&L or empathizing with people that I might be talking to on this podcast more effectively.
Yeah, totally. There's plenty of stuff that's transferable. And I think like just being able to think about business models has been super helpful for me. And it's something figuring out how to match up like what P&G was selling with what the retailer strategy was, like understanding how to make those shifts and adjustments, I think has served me really well even now.
As you reflect on career, are there any best and worst career decisions that you think are fit in with the idea of how people should continue to forge their own paths and create their own way?
Oh man, that's a good question. I had he once tell me, it was a former executive, that the best decisions that he made in his career was joining P&G and leaving P&G. I like really agree. I learned so much. I learned how to operate in the business world. I learned how to think in a structured way and solve problems and utilize resources and all of those things in my time there. I was really ready to go probably for a couple of years before I left. When I left, I made a pretty big leap that was working with a company that was private equity owned and working on a financial turnaround and building a brand back up and reinventing the sales strategy. It was not a startup, but it operated like startup pace. That experience taught me that I can operate outside of a big machine with a lot of resources. I needed that. I always felt confident in my abilities and capabilities, but to step into a job in an industry that I didn't know and learn it and solve problems and figure things out. And sometimes I was Googling, like, what is a CRM system and how do I set one up?
Yeah.
That experience gave me the confidence, I think, that I never would have had to go straight from corporate to doing what I'm doing now. It proved to me like I'm really resourceful and I can just figure things out.
Yeah. This was at Oneida.
Oneida, yeah.
I've heard people jokingly say that there's like an 18-month bounce after a lot of people leave P&G, which I wonder if that's like how it is with people leaving any big company. There's these structures, and it almost takes, after a prolonged time, like an experience that can help reset, reframe, but also be growthful, right? Help you see new skills and help reset. How do you react to that thought?
Yeah, I don't necessarily think that you're gonna leave that next job if you're working at a big corporation, right? And you're working there for a long period of time. Like I was there for over 10 years. Having an experience that is going to teach you, not teach you anything new, show you what you already know and reaffirm you know a lot more than you think you do. I think that is really important. And I think a lot of people might need that experience. I needed it. That could be why there's this phenomenon of, right, people leaving and then figuring out what they're really good at or what they really like, and then being even more okay with taking a bigger risk.
Speaking on like risks, how does the concept of career adventurer coincide with what you champion with clients? The reason I ask is you hear the words adventure, right? And there's this element of like discussion of risk. And so some people might say, oh man, I hear adventure. That means jumping from job to job or moving recklessly. But I feel like there's this kind of continuum. It depends on the person. But how does the concept as a whole, right, coincide with things that you espouse with teams or individuals?
Yeah. Interestingly, like a lot of the people who come to me to do one-on-one work, and I don't do a lot of it, but if someone shows up in my world or they get referred to me and it feels like a good fit, I'll definitely work with them. A lot of what I do is helping people articulate what they're really good at. Ultimately, that gives them the confidence to take these bigger leaps and take some bigger risks or ask for the thing that they're not getting at the job that they're at.
Yeah.
And if the answer is no, then they're like, okay, I can move on to this other thing. So the idea of a career being an adventure, it truly is. The time we have these goals of, okay, I want to be a VP of marketing by such and such age or whatever it is. And it's like, why do you want that? And what's it going to do for you? And what are the trade-offs you're going to have to make to get there? And have you thought through all those things? Do you really want that? And so the adventure piece is like coming back to yourself and what do I care about? What works for me? Yeah, taking things one step at a time and being open to, I don't even have my goal that's 10 steps away. I have just what the next step is in front of me. And I think
Right.
that's been a big reframe for me. I have been used to having those long-term goals. And now I'm like, I'm going to do this one next thing. And then I'm going to be open to whatever that leads me to. Because it could lead me to a totally different business model. It could lead me to doing something totally different or a different opportunity that I wouldn't have ever seen before.
To what extent is it difficult to help people see potential paths that they might be able to embrace? I have a client that I've worked with that identified as a teacher for many years, but took a reframe to then say, wait a minute, you're not a teacher. Yes, a teacher is a part of you, but you're artistic, social, and enterprising, just to use 3 adjectives or something like that. And so you can still be a teacher, but you could also be a librarian if you wanted to. You could also be a salesperson or a marketer. Does it require you to almost like push, prod, help think differently? Because it can be difficult for people to almost think outside of their lived current experience.
Yeah, it is. And I think that's why working with a coach is valuable, right? I think even for myself, it's hard for me to see outside of, I've gotten better at that, but like seeing outside of, okay, this is the goal and this is the next step. And I need other people to help push me on those things too. So I think it's important to find whether it's a group or a coach or something that can help you expand your horizons, find those possibilities. What you said, right? If you start to collect to these things, okay, these are my values, these are my talents, these are industries that I've had experience in, and like, how can we put all these ingredients in a bucket and mix them up in a different way?
Yeah.
Having someone help you brainstorm around that, it doesn't have to be a coach, it can be anybody, but you've got to know what the ingredients are that you're putting into the bucket in order to figure out the different variations of that. The cool thing is today, you can make a business out of literally anything. Like I never sat down and said, I want to work with teams with a personality framework. If I had, that very first question you asked me is like, why did you choose this over this? It's like, it just happened, right? You can pull an idea out of thin air and create a business out of it. We're living in a really cool moment. And so it's okay if we had a little algorithm, put all our inputs in and it gave us career options, which there's lots of books like that. We're not even thinking big enough. It might not even be written as a potential job title in a book, like be anything.
I've loved talking to you about not only your journey, right, but how you've had and embraced like an open mind. I've done a lot of innovation consulting, and sometimes part of the challenge is just helping people to a blank slate, almost like clear their mind to then ultimately be receptive to dots that can be connected. I remember feeling similar to you at one point in time in my career of I don't have any hobbies. I don't have any interests. And I had to like think back and go, wait a minute, I used to have interests. And so I started like to experiment with wine. But hearing how that, I had this interest in Enneagram, and then you immediately applied it to something that you're now doing? Is it something that more and more people could do that can help them step out and find new paths and embrace new ways of growth, whether it's on their company team or whether it's starting a business? So I appreciate you sharing.
It can't be said enough that we can find so much insight about what we could be doing and what we could be really great at in the things that we already do. And not necessarily at work. It could be the things that we do outside
Yeah,
of work, right? The things that we're interested, like you said, wine or
right.
Enneagram or any of these things. It's toward what sparks you and let that just be a possibility. It can feel like a really big leap, and it certainly was for me, but I had taken it in these little steps. I'm creating a brand new career and starting this company.
Right.
Just move toward that thing that sparks your interest on a Saturday if you want to go to a coffee shop and read about this thing or start working on this, or I don't know, set up a workshop in your community. The experimentation of all of it is really valuable. A lot of people, especially if you're going from corporate and you want to go independent, feel like they need to have everything perfectly structured and set up and figured out before they start. That's been a big learning for me. I didn't know anything when I started, and I just had to like put one foot in front of the other and figure it out along the way by doing it. That was a lot of things wrapped into one, but
Bite-sized action that can propel you forward versus recognizing that you have this climbing the mountain can't be done in just one big leap unless you're Superman or Superwoman.
And if you're
Takes
like,
time.
I'm only going to get to the top of this mountain, you might miss a trail that goes off to like a village that actually was way better than what you were going to do. And I think it's when we get so focused on one goal that's really far away, we don't see all the other options. And let me tell you, this is as an Enneagram 3. I know this because I learned it through experience. It's like, I was great at setting a goal and getting there really efficiently. And I've had to really deconstruct a lot of the things that, made me quote unquote successful in the corporate world to figure out what is real and true for me.
Yep. Hey, I appreciate you coming on. This has been Sandhya Sudhakar, founder of Self at Work. My name is Paul Fisher, host of the Career Adventure Podcast. And here's to forging your own unique paths. Thanks for listening.